let's get down to the program for today, addressing Nigeria's cost of living crisis. And what I've just said, it's a symptom of it. Joining me right now is Tosin Osunkoya, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Comercio Asset Management. Welcome again, Tosin, and thank you for joining us. Good morning from Abuja.
Morning, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's get started. Tosin, for me, really, I don't know if you saw that clip. Let's just start from there. The Children's Day clip. Happy Children's Day, though it's 27th, May 27th has gone. So happy Children's Day to all the children. We're still in the month of May. I come to think of it, all of us are children to our parents. You know? So what do you think about what you just heard? What's your own view about it?
Nancy, I think it's a sad situation. And I think it's something that we all should be worried about. I mean, I like the fact that we're discussing the cost of living, which honestly is very pervasive at the moment. And I don't think it's a surprise that everybody, whether the rich or the poor, they're actually feeling the pinch right now. Whether you're young or old, everybody's feeling the heat right now. And honestly, if you look at the statistics, okay, NBS has said that the core inflation, or the headline inflation rather, has increased only by 16.8%. But to be honest, I think it's a lot more than that. People worry about where they get their data from. I mean, I would take, for instance, where I stay, the service charge has increased by almost 100% in the month of March and April. And energy has contributed likely to that. The same thing with food as well. Food prices has been on the rise. And we're talking about significant increase in food prices. We're talking about within the range of 50 to 100%. In some cases, it's depending on the region. So when we look at the data coming out of NBS, and it says that the year-on-year increase in inflation is just about 16.8. I mean, I worry, and I'm sure a lot of people are concerned about that. It's sad that what has happened, all right, is not just limited only to Nigeria. It has a global effect. So the global effect is now, in a way, finding its way into the country. If it was just limited only to Nigeria, you would say that maybe temporarily we could see a respite. But the way things are, particularly with the situation in Eastern Europe between Russia and Ukraine, this might extend for a long time. So the question about the child that queries the use of 5,000, the truth about it is that that child has not realized that that 5,000 could potentially become zero in the next few months. That means the capacity to use that 5,000 to even buy anything in this country could potentially be eroded in the next few months if we don't have a resolution to the Eastern European war, and if you don't have a resolution to inflationary pressure within Nigeria. Food, for instance, contributes about 50% to whatever household spending you have in a particular home. Putting it into context, that means that for every 100 naira that you spend in your home, you will be spending 50% on food. And food prices, like I said, has been on the rise. I mean, if you go to the market to buy, whether you're going to buy bread or buy yam, you will discover that the price you paid in January is not what you're paying right now. It has increased significantly. And we will continue to witness that until something is done, as soon as possible. It's a shame that I don't see any, resolution or solution to this problem in the next few months. Okay, so right now everybody must adopt some type, belt tightening measures to ensure that yes, we weather through the storm.
This is Tosin, you've really painted a very bleak picture. I do know that the picture is bleak because for many of us, just like you said earlier, everybody's affected now. And like I used to say, even big man is affected. Because if you're a big man, the number of dependents or the number of the begging you will get now has increased. Perhaps you'll be closing your doors or you don't answer calls or you don't answer text messages again because people are looking for respite. In your analysis, you did point to the issue of food prices and energy prices. Are there some other indices that suggest the high cost of living in Nigeria? Are there some other indices away from food, energy?
I mean, so if your question is, are there other variables that contribute to the high cost of living? Yes, there are other variables. I hope that's your question.
Yes.
So if you look at, for instance, energy cost, energy is a common denominator. So it costs into fuel, it costs into transportation, it costs into your rents as well. Because when you're building a house, right, you need to move the raw materials, the building materials from one location to the other. So that involves transportation and logistics. So energy is very important. It's a key component of that. So when energy prices are going up, it affects virtually everything that we use in our homes or we use in our offices. So in addition to that, you see also that fuel is very important. Education, because again, it's not just the goods that we're talking about. The services are also going to go up. So when you take out food and energy, it is not just limited to that. You have other areas that would impact the cost of living. However, when you look at the cost of living, you need to compare it with the standard of living. Unfortunately, the cost of living has been on the rise, but the standard of living in this country has not significantly gone up. In fact, it hasn't gone up at all. It has actually declined. And I ask myself that what other measure, how do you measure the standard of living in this country? In the last 7 years, if you took a data in 7 years between 2014 and 2020, you would see, assuming we decide to use a proxy, let's say we use the GDP per capita income. In this country, it was $3,000 in 2014. It has waned significantly by almost 31% to about $2,000, from $3,000 to $2,000 in 2020. So you ask yourself that even when the cost of living is going up, shouldn't the standard of living of people commensurately go up? But that's not the case. It's actually waning. So you see, it's a double jeopardy, a double whammy, if you will. Your cost of living is on the rise and your standard of living is depleted. And you ask that at what point will the government, step in to stem this? You would expect that as our population is on the rise, because our population in the same period is about 2.7% year on year, but the growth in GDP year on year on the average within that same period is just about 1.7. So you see people actually growing, and you'd expect that would translate to economic activities because you have a vibrant young population coming up. And you expect that should, in a way, in an ideal situation or ideal economy, that should translate to economic activities. But that's not what we're experiencing. Rather, what we're experiencing is a decline in our growth in GDP. So, Nancy, there's a lot of moving parts. And honestly, this stems from infrastructural deficit, unemployment. I mean, the list goes on. And I think that the federal government must step in to address all of these before we come out of this. I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom, but the truth is, to be honest, I don't think we are at the end of the situation with regards to the cost of living. I think that until we, in-house, within the country, decide to do the right thing structurally and fundamentally, even when the rest of the world resolves whatever issues that they have, okay, the problem will still be resident locally.
I liked your comparison between the cost of living and the standard of living. I really did not look at it that way. So thank you for even bringing my mind to it, because from your own analysis, the cost of the standard of living really should be about the quality of life. GDP increasing, and if its GDP increases, economic opportunities expand, people live longer, life expectancy is higher, but we see that both are worsening. Though we know the standard of living is high, or majorly high in developed economies. So thank you for bringing us to that point. The other question is, at this point where we are we in a danger zone already? The way we are right now, we're in a crisis mode, the cost of living crisis. Will this crisis mode be worsened? And what can it worsen to? Because you said earlier that Nigerians should tighten the belts.
Yeah, again, I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom, but to be honest, I think that if we are not in a danger zone, we are at the border of that danger zone, and something has to be done, immediately. I know that, I think it was last week that the central bank governor increased NPR to address inflation. To be honest, I think that should have been done, or might expected that would have been done before now. But the challenge with that is it is coming at a time when the economy is already eaten up. Okay, what that would do, in my view, is going to exacerbate the already worsened situation. What do I mean by that? The increase in NPR would only give rise to cost push inflation. The inflation that we have in Nigeria is not a demand pull inflation like you have it in the US, where there's so much money chasing, fuel supply, because they have a supply chain, disruption. So they've been giving out a lot of stimulus package. So there's a lot of money in the US chasing fuel goods. But in Nigeria, that's not the case because we are not so productive, right? So what has happened is when you increase the NPR, what would happen is that the real sector, the manufacturing sector, every sector, the financial service sector, they are going to pass on that particular increase to increase in borrowing, an increase in facility given to the real sector. And when that happens, the real sector, by way of production of their goods and services, will pass it on to end users. So end users will begin to see some of their services or goods that are being consumed, increasing in price. So inflation to me is still going to go up. I think so. So are we in a danger zone? I think if we're not in a danger zone, we are at the border of that danger zone. However, what should be the solution? The solution is not a quick fix. Rome wasn't built in a day, but what we need to do is to begin to structurally and fundamentally address certain things. For instance, we have an expansionary budget. Okay, that budget, if you look at it, we're spending a lot more on recurrent expenditure rather than capital expenditure. In our situation, I think, just like in Ghana, where they are also trying to shrink their budget, I think that in Nigeria, we need to begin to look inwards and try to see how we can make our budget efficient. An efficient budget means that you are deploying a lot of your cash or your revenue into capital expenditure. And on top of that, you have policies that would promote SMEs growth in the country and that would attract foreign direct investment. So we have so many things that we need to deal with. Unfortunately, it's a pre-election year. I'm sure not so much attention is being paid to policy formation and giving the right policy to foster, promote SME growth. Every country relies solely on the growth of their SMEs. That's the truth. Most of the big brands that we have today, whether from South Korea, or from Germany, or from US, or from Europe, they were SMEs at a point. And because the countries of those SMEs, of those companies, promoted policies that will make them thrive and grow, they were able to go outside of the shores of those countries and come to other developing countries. In Nigeria, we need to begin to see it that way. Every small company that is being set up we must see them as a big global brand in the future. So how do we promote them? With the right policies. That's one. Then your policies must also attract foreign direct investment. If after pre-election and election, whoever comes into power, we must begin to put policies in place that would attract foreign direct investment. When that is not done, what happens is you continue to suffer the currency depreciation or currency risk. And when that happens, no foreign direct investment or no foreign portfolio investor wants to come into Nigeria because of your currency situation, because of your FX liquidity. And when there's a problem with your currency situation, what happens is that you have imported inflation into the country. One is we're dealing with an in-house inflationary pressure. Then you also have imported inflation coming into the country because we are an import-dependent country. So we have myriads of problems, Nancy. And honestly, I think with the right mindset, we should be able to get out of this, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Are you seeing that right mindset already? Are you seeing a glimpse of that right mindset already? Because if we're taking a look at the data, the data is just bad across board. You know, when I'm reading researches, when I'm looking at this data, I don't like looking at them because, you know, it saddens me. If my team can actually put forward the inflation data, the trend from January till now, it's been worsening. In fact, it's been worsening since 2016, double digit. In 2015, we had a single digit inflation data. So are you seeing anything good coming out? Are you seeing a mindset that there is an understanding of these problems and we're going to find solutions? That's one. The B part of the question is also what you said about the budget. We have an expansionary budget, but what our budget is used for now, only God knows. You did talk about capital expenditure, spending more capital expenditure, but I also know that not all capital expenditure is good, because even in our current budget, you would see that the government wants to buy computers, 100 computers. Next year again, you will see that same 100 computers there. So not all capital expenditure is good, and not all recurrent expenditure is bad. But where we are right now, debt profile is high, 40 trillion naira, expected to hit close to 50, 55, 60 trillion naira because of the budget deficit and fuel subsidy approval that has been gotten by Mr. President. So if you put all of this together, Tosin, you've just said no end in sight, but are you seeing a right mindset? Yes. You know, so it's really sometimes so sad talking about this almost every day on the show, you know?
Yeah, Nancy, I mean, you're right that our macros are not looking good. I mean, if you look at the numbers coming out of Nigeria, it is nothing to write home about. Okay, but I think there's a bit of, you know, bouts of political will, and we just need execution. We need a follow-up with some of the policies we're putting in place. I think there's a semblance of the government trying to address certain issues. One of which is the fact that the central bank, with the intervention funds, you know, coming out. The only challenge I have with the fund, it's not widespread. I don't think it's effective. I don't think it has a wider coverage. I mean, this is me. I don't think there's a monitoring mechanism of ensuring that the monies are being used judiciously, and we can see the effects of those funds. Okay, if you can monitor it, then we'll be able to know if truly they're being effective. What our intent was at the time when these monies were being given out. Are we able to achieve it? And if the answer is yes, then you now think about how to scale it and build a structure around it. But the government's intention was very good. Okay, the intention was, let us see how we can stimulate the economy by rendering or giving out this stimulus package or interventions. That's one. Then another measure, I think, came out from central bank again, was a few months ago when they introduced RT 200, which is basically meant, you know, to promote exports in the country. All right, so Nancy, honestly, you know, we have loads of natural resources and human resources in this country. So when people go to church every Sunday and they pray to God, that God please help the country, God is saying that I've done my bit, you guys should do your bit as well. I have blessed you with so many natural
So many
resources.
things.
Name the natural resources, we have it. Indonesia recently said that they were going to ban, or they ban export of, you know, palm oil out of the country.
Yeah.
You know that some companies benefited from that. Why? Because we're able to produce palm oil in this country. There was a time when palm oil from this country was one of our major earnings. So where is that? I mean, it's a laundry list of natural resources in this country. They're talking about human capital resources. We have it in the technology space, in the power space, in aviation, in education. We have it. In financial services, we have it. Nigeria now today has been touted to be one of the fastest growing financial services, you know, country in the world because we come up with so many innovations. So with human capital, we have it. So to your question, we have everything that it takes, at least to get us out of the wood. But the problem is that we do not have, and I'm very careful to say this, it's just about the political will and execution at the right leadership level to get these things done and to put our foot on the ground and say that in the next 1 or 2 years, we need to be at this level. Then when you talk about the inflation permeating into certain sectors, you mentioned that, for instance, if transportation is on the rise because of fuel price, you would understand that transportation cuts across is a common denominator. Like I said before, transportation and logistics, it's a common denominator. So when there's an increase in energy price, it affects virtually everything that you do in this country. And how do we address that? So we are a country that produces, crude oil, right? And we are hoping that Dangote refineries will come into full operation in 2023. When that happens, maybe that could, in a way, help to address some of our energy concerns and currency concerns as well. But we've been in this same situation many years ago. Right? We've had refineries that were meant to be working, but they never worked. So you see, in-house, we have the capacity to do everything that we could do to save this country from this dire situation right now, but it has not been done. So going forward now, we are hoping that the right thing will be done to address this. Otherwise, we might see the situation worsen.
Okay, as we round up this, interview, Tosin, how do Nigerian households protect their financial securities? How do Nigerians cope? How should we cope with this cost of living crisis? Because it's still perhaps going to get worse. Like you said, you don't want to be an angel of doom. I hate to be that on a Monday morning, but that is the reality looking at the data that we have. How should households better protect themselves at this time? What can we cling on till perhaps a few months' time or in the medium term? Then we can see all of this a bit.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for that. And honestly, when I say households, I mean everybody, the rich and the poor, everybody, young and old, right? I think it's a lesson for everybody. We are going through what you call the wilderness. But during that period, there must be learnings that we must take, right? I think for every household, you need to prioritize the essential goods or commodities that you need in the household. That's the first thing. So I think you need to put aside your wants as opposed to your needs. Your needs must be things that you prioritize. Okay, food, for instance. And again, even with food, you need to be very, very decent in the level of what you eat and how you store your food. You cannot afford to be wasteful during this period, honestly. This is a period, and if you allow me to say that in the Bible, where there was 7 years of famine. And 7 years of bounty harvest. So now we're going through that period of famine, right? So what that means is that we need to be very efficient and decent in the way we manage essential commodities. We cannot afford to be wasteful. I'll give you a typical example. So if you go into your homes, make sure all your lights are switched off when you are not in those rooms. Or you put on your AC. If you are not in that particular room, switch off that AC. You are conserving your energy cost. When you go to Europe or you go to London or London, and you go visit any of your friends, they know the importance of that. As you're moving out of the room, they are screaming at you, please switch off that light. But when they come to Nigeria, everybody just, take things, the way they like. And you allow those costs to mount up. So my advice is you need to have a list of all your items, the commodities that are very essential, and how you manage each one of them. You must track them. Gone are the days when you leave things to chance. You cannot afford to do that. So on the side of cost, because for every household, there are two blocks or two variables. You have the cost management and you have the income. Maximization that we'll talk about. So the cost management is the first one. You need to begin to look at how to manage your cost, and you must be very mindful of that. When you talk about income right now, I think everybody needs to begin to work on the capacity, the earning capacity for themselves. Most people do not realize that the biggest assets that you have is yourself. That means your earning capacity. How much can I possibly earn outside of what I'm earning right now? Do you have some other skill sets that I'm not using? Okay, do I have cash that are being idle or that are not being put to use? How do I flow them? How do I buy assets with those cash? I think right now you begin to see some cheap assets in the market. You need to begin to talk to some professionals that will help you to buy some of those assets. It could be landed property. It could be, government bonds or government securities that you want to buy into, or you could be some professionals helping you to manage your assets. You must begin at this stage, ask yourself, other than what I'm doing right now to generate 1,000 naira a day, what more can I do to generate additional 500, additional 300? So from the capacity generation standpoint, you need to expand your capacity. So when you come home one day, you need to ask yourself, if I'm managing my costs, all right, and I'm also trying to expand my earning capacity. You know why that is very important? There's certain things that you could control. What you could control is just what I just described, that those two variables within your capacity. The other thing that you cannot control is what happens at the macro level. You might not have, the power to control it. What happens at the government level? You don't have the capacity to control it. What happens in Eastern Europe? You don't have control over it. So this is the only way by which you can actually immune yourself to those shocks. Manage your costs. Make sure you prioritize all you need to do to essential commodities, needs only, not wants. Not flashy, Gucci shoes and bags and all those things. Wants, market aside, needs, prioritize. Then you look into your earning capacity as well.
Thank you very much, Tosin, for joining us today and bringing in some kind of perspectives, especially how households need to manage at this time. I like the analogy of 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty, because it seems that's where we are right now. So we need to tighten our seatbelt. We need to brace up. We need to also collaborate more. You need to earn. You need to reduce your cost and all of that. So thank you for your insights today. Hope to speak to you soon.
Nancy.
Yeah. I've been speaking with Tosin Osunkoya, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Comercio Partners Asset Management. And that's the show today. You've all watched, you've listened, you've heard. I hope that you've taken some nuggets out of today's interview. We are not trying to be angels of doom, but with the data that everyone has access to is what we're using to analyze. We hope that this administration, before this administration goes, that is able to get a solution. If not, all hands should be on deck, or all eyes will be on the incoming administration, whatsoever party. The enormous challenges we have, so many, so huge, but I wish all of us the best. I am Nancy. Nnaji, be the best you can be, and be that change that you want to see. I'll see you all again tomorrow, God willing. And let me just also say this, yes, there's a public presentation of the IMF's Regional Economic Outlook Spring 2022 issue coming up later this afternoon, 3 p.m. Nigerian time. We will be there, and trust us, we will give you the updates on the show tomorrow. What does the IMF have to say about Nigeria? We'll give it to you tomorrow. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Bye now.